جئت بالأمر المطاع.
In the inner chamber, there is also the strip of paradise. The Prophet said, the strip between my shrine and the pulpit, the mimbar, that is the strip of paradise. And when we say our prayers there, we feel the contentment, the tranquility, and the peace of paradise. And that is why, as pilgrims, when we are in the Holy Mosque, we always try to make sure that we get to say our prayers at least once during our visit in that strip. We talked about the original doors when the mosque was first built. We said there were 3 doors. The main entrance in the first 16 months was facing towards the side of Kaaba, and after the 16 months when the Qibla was changed, it was now facing the side of Masjid al-Aqsa in Jerusalem. But the 2 side doors, one is called the door of Jibreel and one is called the door of Rahmah. That door of Jibreel is in exactly the same location today as it was when it was first done. The other door on the right as we face the Qibla is called the door of Rahmah. It's called the door of Rahmah because once when the Prophet there was giving his Friday sermon, a man came in through this door and asked for the Prophet to pray for rain in the city of Yathrib. And when he went out, it rained for the next 6 days. So this is called the door of Rahmah. But since the original time, there has been extensions to this building. Therefore, the door kept moving further to the right as we face the Qibla. It's in exactly the same latitude position, but the longitude position kept changing until where it is today. In the mosque, there are 4 mihrabs. A mihrab is a spot where the imam or the leader leads the prayer. And it is in this spot, normally then, a recess would be built around the wall or an alcove built around it, and this is called a mihrab. The first mihrab is the Prophet's mihrab. The Prophet used to lead the prayer from a certain spot, but nothing was built during his lifetime. It was only in the year 91 Hijrah. The Prophet died in 11 Hijrah. So after about 80 years, the first ever structure of the mihrab was built at that spot. And it was ordered to be built by the leader Walid bin Malik, who was in Damascus. He gave an order to Omar Abdul Aziz, who was the governor in Medina, to build that first mihrab. And that is the mihrab position that is built and that we see today. There were other various renovations throughout the year, but much later on, in the year 888 Hijrah, in early 1500 AD, the king of Egypt, King Katabi, who built the mimbar, he also now built a mihrab. And he built it made out of marble, and the shape and the style and the design of that mihrab is there until today. It has been renovated since, but it has retained the same shape and the same style. So from 888 Hijrah, from about early 1500 AD, up to very recently, 1404 Hijrah, 1983 AD, King Fahd of Saudi, when he did a major renovation, he also renovated this mihrab. But the style, the design, and the shape is the same as it was from the time of King Katabi in 888 Hijrah. This mihrab is placed in such a way so as to preserve the sanctity of where the Prophet used to go into sujood. So when he used to go into prostration, the exact position where his head would touch the ground, that spot is covered by the wall. So even today, if we were to pray in that mihrab, where we would be putting our head would be where the Prophet's feet would be. This is to keep the sanctity of the Prophet's position. The second mihrab is called the mihrab of the Tahajjud. This mihrab we do not see. During the time of the Prophet, as we said, he used to recite the namaz Tahajjud behind the room of Lady Fatima. When he used to recite this, certainly in Ramzan, Imam Ali also used to accompany him. When in Ramadan people used to see that the Prophet and Imam Ali are reciting this prayer behind the house of Lady Fatima, they started to join in. and the Prophet had to tell them not to join in because this was not a wajib salah, lest it should then be made wajib on ordinary people during the month of Ramadan. And that is where a mihrab was then built during the time of 888 Hijrah, King Katabi, when he brought the mimbar and renovated the mihrab of the Prophet, he also built a mihrab in this place. Although we do not see this mihrab, just in front of the wall of the Lady Fatima's house, there is a raised platform which is a rectangular enclosure running through the wall of the width of Lady Fatima's house. And we find pilgrims sitting in that enclosure reciting their prayers. Certainly during the early morning for Salatul Tahajjud, we see pilgrims reciting there. The third mihrab is called the Osmaniya mihrab. During the time of the Prophet, the mosque was extended in 7 Hijrah during his own time a little bit. It was extended again during the time of leader Omar and during the time of leader Osman. But during the time of leader Omar and leader Osman, they extended even towards the Kaaba side. So if in line of where the mihrab of the Prophet is, Kaaba is to that side, they extended each about 5 meters going towards the Kaaba. And it was there in front of the mihrab of the Prophet that leader Osman used to lead the prayers. When he used to lead the prayers from this spot, he used to have an enclosure around it because leader Omar was assassinated in the mosque. And because he did not want to be assassinated the same way, he formed an enclosure with windows so the people behind could see him. But again, that was just a spot, no mihrab, no recess was built. It was built in the year 91 Hijrah, the same time as the Prophet's mihrab was built. And this is the mihrab that is used until today to lead the prayers from. And this is where now you see permanent microphones and cameras placed. So whenever the prayers are led from the Prophet's mosque, it is not led from the Prophet's mihrab, it is led from the Osmaniya mihrab. And this is where we see a long corridor. For the Osmaniya mihrab now, if you were to go right towards the right-hand side is the door of Salam, and right towards the left-hand side where the shrine of the Prophet is called the door of Baqi. This door of Baqi was built recently, but it provides a 10-meter wide corridor from one end, from the door of Salam, to the other end where the shrine is, the door of Baqi. The fourth mihrab is called the mihrab of Sulaimaniyya. The Sulaimaniyya mihrab was in fact fairly recent. It was built in 980 Hijrah in 1572 AD. What had happened was 2 groups of Muslims did not agree on the time of Fajr prayers. The Hanafi and the Shafi recited prayers at different time, and therefore they could not use the same Osmaniya mihrab. So therefore, what they then did was King Suleiman from Turkey in the year 980 Hijrah built another mihrab for them. It's called the Sulaimaniyya mihrab, named after the king of Turkey. So the Hanafis used to recite their Fajr prayers led from the Sulaimaniyya mihrab, and the Shafi used to recite it led from the Osmaniya mihrab. This mihrab, the Sulaimaniyya mihrab, is there until today, although it is not used, and it is in line with the Prophet's mihrab. So the Prophet's mihrab, if we go towards the right-hand side, we would also see the Sulaimaniyya mihrab.
Ya Rasul, salam alayka. Ya Habib, salam alayka. Salawatullah alayka. Ya Nabi, salam alayka. Ya Rasul, salam alayka. Ya Habib, salam alayka.
Let us now take an overview of the various extensions that occurred since the time of the Prophet. There are 13 renovations and extensions recorded. The original mosque that was built by the Prophet was 34 meters by 29 meters, rectangular in shape, and 2.5 meters in height. The first extension actually occurred during the time of the Prophet himself in the year 7 Hijrah. The rectangle was expanded a bit and the height was increased by a meter to 3.5 meters. There were then extensions, the second extension during the time of leader Omar, the third extension during the time of leader Osman. But a major extension occurred, the fourth extension occurred in the year 88 Hijrah. And this was ordered by leader Walid Malik from Damascus, and the governor in Medina was Umar Abdul Aziz. And the first major extension occurred at this time. Also at this time, the rooms of the wives of the Prophet, which until this time was outside the mosque area, were now included in the mosque area itself. Because by this time, 88 Hijrah, all the wives of the Prophet had died, and these rooms were now empty, and they were brought into the compound of the mosque. It was also at this time in 88 Hijrah that the first 4 minarets were now built on the mosque itself. Each of those was about 28 meters high. There was then a fifth extension, but a major extension occurred in the year 680 Hijrah. There was a fire in the year 654 Hijrah, corresponding to 1256 AD. And this fire, it destroyed the whole mosque, so it had to be built again from scratch. Although the pillar positions, the mihrab positions, the mimbar positions were all put in the same place. And this was overseen by the king in Egypt called King Kalawun. And it was King Kalawun now, in the year 680 Hijrah, built the dome as we see today over the shrine of the Prophet. So it is the same shape, the same design that we see today. But the cover was made out of molten lead, so at the time it was brown in color. There was then a seventh minor extension, but again there was a second fire 200 years on after the first fire. And this occurred in the year therefore 886 Hijrah, where the 8th extension was now done. Again, it was overseen by the king from Egypt, but this time it was King Qaitabe. And he made sure the whole renovation of the mosque was done again to make sure the same locations, the pillar locations, the mihrab and the mimbar were in also the same position. There was a minor extension, the 9th extension, during the time of the Turkish king called King Sultan Suleiman. And this was done in the year 974 Hijrah, corresponding to 1567 AD. The major difference he did apart from the renovation was that he now changed the color of the dome from brown to green. And that is the color that has remained until today. Naturally, it is repainted and renovated over time, but the shape and design and the color has remained exactly the same. There was then a 10th minor renovation. However, in the year 1265 Hijrah, corresponding to 1849 AD, there was a big major renovation called the 11th extension. And this was done by the Turkish king called Sultan Abdul Majid. And the extension was so massive, it was so big, it took 12 years to complete. After that, the next major extension, called the 12th major extension, was fairly recent. It was in 1372 Hijrah, 1952 AD. By this time, the Saudi are now in power. We have the Kingdom of Saudi as we see it today. And King Abdul Aziz ordered what is called the first Saudi expansion. So there was then an expansion from the last one, from the Turkish expansion. We now had the first Saudi expansion. In time, the pilgrims were increasing in numbers and the capacity was not enough. So during the time of his son, in what is called the second Saudi expansion, during the time of King Fahd bin Abdul Aziz, which occurred in the year 1405 Hijrah, 1984 AD. This was a massive second expansion of the Saudi, and that is the expansion more or less to what it is today. So from the original time when the Prophet built up to the 13th expansion of the Saudi second expansion, the mosque area has increased 80 times its original area. Today, in full capacity, using the ground floor and the roof, the mosque can take comfortably 1 million pilgrims. It's a wonderful, majestic architectural design. If we look at the mosque, if you get the overall picture from the aerial side, you will see there are 27 moving domes. These domes are thermostatically, hydro and computer controlled, so that whenever the temperature rises above a certain point in the inner mosque inside, these domes would automatically open. And though normally they would open in early evening, stay open at night until early morning. And when the sun starts rising and falls onto the courtyard, they would then close. But the beauty about these particular domes is because they are thermostatically controlled, they are also very, very quiet. Because one of the protocol of the Prophet's mosque is there should be no noise heard. And if you get a chance, go to the roof during your visit in Medina. In the early evening or early morning, you will see these domes opening and closing. And it's a wonderful sight. The mosque as we see today, because of the Turkish expansion and the first Saudi expansion, there is an open courtyard between these two. And there are 2 open courtyards. Each open courtyard has got 6 folding umbrellas. So in total, there are 12 umbrellas in the courtyard of the mosque. Again, these umbrellas are used during the time of the day when the heat is its strongest. They would open up and shelter the mosque. During the evenings and at night, the umbrellas will fall down so there is fresh air coming through. Again, these are computer controlled and thermostatically controlled. And whenever there is a drop of rain coming through, the computers would pick them up and the umbrellas would open. The beauty again is, despite the huge sizes, when these umbrellas open and close, it is almost noiseless. And now recently, the same umbrellas have now been built on the outside courtyard also, so the pilgrims are sheltered during the day also. The mosque has got a basement which is the same area as the ground floor itself. In the basement there are car parking facilities, but particularly there are ablutions and washroom facilities. And these facilities are up to date, they are very clean, and there are literally hundreds of facilities down in the basement for the pilgrims to use. There are 6 escalators and 18 stairwells in the modern structure that we see today. Medina has got a hot climate, yet when we are in the mosque we do not feel the heat. It is a very comfortable, cool temperature. But yet we do not see any air conditions around. So where is the air conditioning in this huge mosque? The air conditioning is in fact in each and every pillar. There are literally hundreds of thousands of pillars in the mosque. And each pillar towards the bottom, if you look at it, has got little vents. These vents again are thermostatically controlled. They are computer controlled to keep the same temperature during daytime and during nighttime. But yet you do not even hear these ventilators opening or closing, or even the murmur of the air condition. Why? Because the generators are not in the vicinity of the mosque. The Saudis had followed the Quran's rule that there must be no noise in the Prophet's mosque. So the generators are built not near the mosque but 7 kilometers away. They are big generators, 4 big generators which are running all the time. And if any one of those fails, there is another 4 backup generators. And these generators are now connected to the mosque through the underground system by a piping and wiring system. So in the mosque itself, you do not even hear the murmur of the generator. The cool water that is available in the mosques needs to be cooled. The cooling plants make noise again. So again, they are not in the Prophet's mosque. They are in the same place where the generators for electricity and air conditioning are. And there again, there's a piping system which then transports the cool water from this plant into the mosque itself. The mosque now has got 10 minarets. The first 4 minarets were built in 88 Hijrah from the order of Walid Marik, and each of those at the time was 28 meters in height. When King Kaitabi from Egypt brought in the mimbar and the mihrabs, he also built another minaret in the year 888 Hijrah. But in the first Saudi extension, they removed 2 of these minarets and they replaced them with 2. And each of those was now much higher at 72 meters. So during the time of the first Saudi expansion, there was now a total of 4 minarets. During the time of the second Saudi expansion, 6 more minarets were built, and each of these 6 minarets are 104 meters high. So today when we look, we see the 6 very tall minarets built during the second expansion, and the other 4 minarets built during the time, early ones originally from 88 Hijrah onwards. And they are of a less height than the 6 minarets recently built.
Ya Rasul salam alayka, Ya Habib salam alayka, salawatullah alayka, Ya Nabi salam alayka, Ya Rasul salam alayka, Ya Habib salam alayka.
The body of the Holy Prophet, which is in the shrine of the inner chamber itself. There were attempts made to try and take away the body to other countries, principally Egypt and Syria. The first attempt was made around 386 Hijrah. At that time, the king in Egypt was called Hakim bi Amrillah. And he wanted to take the body from Medina to Egypt. But he was foiled before even the plan got underway. However, 25 years on, he had learnt another way of doing it. So this time he sent his people to go and live around the Prophet's mosque and to mix with the local people. And what these people then did was they started to dig a tunnel from their houses into the Prophet's shrine to try and steal the body. The tunnel was dug, and as they were trying to get through into the tunnel to the shrine, they were caught and the plan was foiled. There was the third attempt 150 years on, around 557 Hijrah. This time is by the Christians from Morocco. They also built a tunnel. But this time now, the king from Egypt, King Zanki, the one who built the platform in the inner chamber, when he got the news that people are trying to dig around the tunnel, he gave an order that a trench be dug around the Prophet's grave, and it was then filled with molten lead, which is a metallic material, so people then could not dig around the Prophet's shrine. So when these Christians from Morocco tried to do it, they were foiled again. Another attempt was done 20 years on, 578 Hijrah, by the Syrian Christians. Again, they tried to dig through, but their plan was foiled. And the last attempt was done even one further after that, but Tabari could not get an exact year in which this was done. But certainly there was an attempt by the Syrians, and this time people were caught not only with equipment to dig ground, but also with torches to try and burn the metal around it. But again, this plan was foiled. So that overall gives an overview of Medina and the mosque and the inner chamber and the courtyard of the Mosque of Medina. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
طلع البدر علينا من ثنيات الوداع وجب الشكر علينا ما دعا لله داع
لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك إن الحمد والنعمة لك الملك لا شريك لك لبيك اللهم لبيك لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك إن الحمد والنعمة لك الملك لا